AI is nothing but a tool to help you tell your story. But the initial story, the initial spark, the creative energy still has to come from a human, always. That isn't what Kickstarter was initially invented for, right? Some big company doing like a product launch there. And also the way just society thinks about businessmen and thinks about capitalism as a whole is very different.
Right. Let's take us back to the start of AER, back to 2016, right? When you launched it.
Yes.
So you launched AER Video on Kickstarter, you raised a ton of hype, and you ended up with a few thousand backers, if that's correct?
Mm-hmm. 2,000, around 2,000. Yep.
2,000, that's really cool. So what was that moment like when you sort of realized how many people actually wanted to throw their cameras?
Oh, wow. It was exciting. I was in first year of university, very young, very naive. And we basically just did this more or less out of our dorm rooms, started this project after we've built our own prototypes, basically just to solve a problem that we had ourselves, which was no access to a drone. But our Instagram feeds got flooded with like aerial photos all of a sudden because DJI brought out the first few like more or less affordable drones. Still not affordable to me in that situation, but a lot of people I followed started, posting aerial photos and videos. And then we just had this idea of throwing our GoPro to get the same effect. And we really, lots of duct tape and 3D printing and some like old cardboard was involved to build our prototypes. And once we had something that basically worked for us, we're like, okay, this is fun. And then in the university context, we're like, maybe more people would like to have this and maybe we can make a real product out of this. And we became ambitious and just basically prepared this Kickstarter campaign without really questioning too much where this is going to lead us, how this is all going to work out. And we more or less just focused on, the product development and marketing side of things. That's basically it. And then launched it on Kickstarter. And then, it kind of made some waves, became viral, at least in this little like GoPro and action sports photography bubble. And it was super, super exciting, made me super proud because I'm like, okay, all these other people in my university, they're not doing anything. And look at me, I have all these backers and every day it became more. But then it also quickly became scary, right?
Yeah.
Because we didn't really know anything. We're like, oh, shit, this is becoming serious quickly now. And all of a sudden there's 2,000 people that are waiting for us to deliver this product. So from this initial excitement, it was still exciting and I was still super proud and it was a good time, but it became scary pretty quickly once we realized, okay, shit, this is actually not a lot of time. We promised them, I think our campaign was in summer of 2016, like September, end of summer. And we're like, yeah, we're totally going to ship these products in January, which was just, completely unrealistic from the start. And we were even like studying old other Kickstarter campaigns, right? And we're like, oh, look at all of these guys delivering way too late. It's not going to happen to us, right?
Yeah,
Completely naive. But the initial moment of this like taking off was super exciting, super fun. Yeah.
So it sounds like you were delayed with the shipment of this, right? For how long?
Yes. It's hard to say like one specific time frame because we started shipping the first ones, I think, in March. So this was like only 2-3 months of delay. But then it took us so much time to produce them because production, I can get into this, turned out to be much more complicated than we had initially thought. So we shipped out in batches. So the first backers got it with like 3 months of delay, but the last ones of those 2,000, actually it was more than 2,000 because within the Kickstarter campaign, it was 2,000 backers, but immediately the day after the Kickstarter campaign ended, we started a pre-order on our website, which is basically the same exact thing. So those people who pre-ordered then from the website, they got it like at the end of 2017. So the delay was somewhere between 3 months and 9 months.
Yeah, I got it. So leading up to this Kickstarter campaign, how many GoPros did you actually destroy in the throwing process? Had to be a few, right?
It was a few of the lens covers, not the GoPro itself. So back in the day, and this has changed depending on the model, but this is really a long time ago. So the GoPro back then didn't have like a screen. in the front, and the lens cover was replaceable. So we did
All right.
crack a few of those lens covers. The GoPro itself, we never broke. They're crazy robust. It really is just the
That's
glass that shatters, and the GoPro itself can take a real beating. Yeah.
that's a pretty good review for the GoPros themselves.
Absolutely, and I'm happy to give credit to the GoPro company because that's kind of like what we based our whole business model on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, of course. So, what was your experience with Kickstarter? Like, would you recommend others to do the crowdfunding routes? Like any lessons you learned that you can share?
Whether or not I would recommend it, it really depends on the type of product, I would say. For certain products, I would definitely not recommend it. For other things, I would. Also, I think one has to realize Kickstarter has changed a lot since its like initial launch. And yeah, I've learned a ton of things. I think Kickstarter nowadays, I feel like, is often used as a just a marketing platform for big
Yeah,
brands to do like a product launch without much risk. It's like, oh, we can, feel the market out and see how many people are actually into this. And then they're just using Kickstarter for the reach because Kickstarter does have a lot of just people that just go on Kickstarter and check out new products. So a lot of times in my eyes, I mean, I'm sure the management of Kickstarter would disagree because they want to have the big brands on there. But
of
in
course.
my eyes, that isn't what Kickstarter was initially invented for, right? Some
Yeah,
big company doing like a product launch there. Um, but for the for what Kickstarter was really intended for, people like myself, a college student that just has an idea and wants to kickstart that journey, I think it can be really, really great. And one of the things that I've learned, and I would tell people that are maybe in that situation, is proactive and transparent communication towards your backers is the most important. And that's the only way we manage to do this. I think as soon as you just hold back with information or you're like promising things you can't really hold. I mean, I did certainly promise things that we couldn't deliver, but the moment we realized we couldn't deliver, we would do an update and transparently communicate what our problems are, what our issues are, what our intended solutions for those problems are, and how we're going about it. And I think this is really, really crucial. Generally, I think talking to your customers in a transparent fashion is a good way to go, but specifically on Kickstarter because people that are backing campaigns on Kickstarter, they want to be part of the journey. They want to have those updates. They want to know what's going wrong. If you just have a casual customer that bought your product on Amazon, that person might not care about the struggles you have as a founder. But if people are funding you on Kickstarter, they're actually interested in that. So it's like a win-win. You tell them, hey, I'm having this problem. Sometimes we even had like useful ideas from our backers. They're like, hey, I'm a material because for us it had a lot to do with the durability of the product. Luckily, the GoPros were safe, but our product would then break or get
oh,
damaged
okay.
if you use it wrong. And we had those products. So the initial batch we produced that we were meant to be shipping in January, it just couldn't hold up to what we wanted from the product. So we're like, okay, cool that the GoPro is safe, but if our product breaks, that sucks. So we just didn't want to deliver that. And we just did like a transparent update. We're like, hey, we're having this issue with our product. The material isn't how we intended it. And we have certain problems. And then there's like, all of a sudden, out of the 2,000 people, there's like a material scientist. And he's like, I have an idea. You could try this. So I think this is the number one advice I have for people that start on Kickstarter is just be transparent, and proactive. And instead of like giving the update after 5 people ask for the update, just give the update without someone asking for it. Give them the update, give them more update. It's always better to communicate too much than too little, I would say, in situations like this, because people can just not read it, but you don't have to be like only one update a month. Do one every week if you feel like you need to. That would be
Yeah,
my advice. Yeah.
that sounds like a really good plan, like really good advice. So do you think that it's being that sort of proactive with updates helps you with building more of a, like, let's say a fan base, so to speak, also that you build your relationship with
Yes,
customers?
absolutely. Absolutely. And I think because we started with that on Kickstarter, we basically just kept doing that. We kept
Mm.
building this audience, and again, depending really on the business model and what your products are and what your like target group is, or target market. But yeah, in our case, this is something that was really important to me and to us as a company from the beginning. Also, I think this it really helped that basically I was building a product for myself, so a lot of like my target market was people like me, so I like them, right? So
Yeah.
I'd love to like to have like when this community started growing and becoming, a real thing. This is something like, oh, I would love to be in touch with these people. These are all like interesting people, just like myself. They love GoPros, they love taking photos, and I think this is an advantage you have if you have a business where you're basically also part of the audience. Then this community building becomes really fun and something that's actually not like a task, but more like a positive side effect of running this business. It's like, okay, I'm connecting to all these like creatives that are actually like creative filmmakers, photographers. Um, and yeah, I think there's really a strong bond between the brand and the community because they feel like they've been a part of the journey. So
Mm.
whenever they have the product and they're out with the air on a shoot or on holidays, wherever, and people are like, "Oh, what's this product?" They're not just gonna be like, "Oh, it's just a thing you can throw your GoPro with." They're gonna be like, "Oh, it's the thing this dude from Germany started in 2016, and I helped him do this and that," and then they have much more context and they're much more connected to your brand. And there was one particular moment where I could really feel how strong this community is, and this is when we all of a sudden there was a copycat. There was
All
a
right.
brand that came out with a very, very similar product after we had long launched. It was, I mean, I never talked to them directly, but it was heavily inspired by our product. I
Oh,
mean,
okay.
there's no denying it. Basically looked like ours, just a little bit different, right? And we never had a like a patent or some kind of like, I mean, the brand was what do you say that secured? Like they couldn't put our logo on it and
A
call it our
trademark,
name.
right?
Yeah, the brand was trademarked, but there was no
Mm.
technical patent on the product or the design itself. So on legal
Yeah.
terms, they can totally do this. They can totally copy our idea. There's nothing we can do legally against that. But what happened was so fun because they launched their product and they had a launch video on YouTube, on Instagram, and in the comments was 90% of my customers telling them how fake it
Nice.
is. Everybody's like, "Oh, this is just like the Air. Oh, this is just a copy of the Air. You guys should check out Air Video. They are actually the inventors of this." So to a point where I almost felt bad. I'm like, okay, this is just some guy starting a business, and probably he worked months on this product and this video, and then they're launching, and the comments was just full with my customers. And it's not like I told them to do so. It's not like I was like, oh, this guy's copying us. Let's like go in his comments. They just did that because they felt like they're a part of my brand and this community, and then all of a sudden they were offended that somebody else
Yeah.
is doing this, right? My customers were offended by the copy, and then they just put a lot of comments on there. And I think at the end of the story was that their launch video gave us customers because everybody read the comments and was like, okay, there's a real thing that's already existing since 2 years. Let me go buy the original thing, So yeah,
That's a loyal fan base.
that was a really loyal fan base. Yep.
It almost sounds like if they were part of the Kickstarter campaign, that they were almost part of the story of building it as well. With your updates and
Exactly.
everything, they feel a part of it. Like, we've been part of it from day
Yep.
one, and no one's gonna come in and steal this idea from us or like our thing, our
Exactly.
relationship. So that's really cool. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah, and we actively went into that direction, and we wanted to have exactly this effect. We called them the Air Force,
That's
right?
a good name.
A fun name. It's like our
Yeah.
community is the Air Force, and then we had basically since the beginning we had like shot of the month. So we would have like a contest where it's like, okay, the best air shot of the month. But then instead of us just selecting the best photo or video, we put this back on the community. We're like, okay, everybody apply, and the coming month, these are the contestants, and now everybody got to vote. So they had always had a say in the development, in the marketing, yes, but also then later on, we're like, okay, we want to release a new color. What color do you guys want? And then they got to vote on what the new color is going to be. And then we're like, because we oftentimes then had this effect because our product is compatible with the GoPro because we started it for the GoPro. But then, as you might know, other brands came out with action cams and they became really good. And all of a sudden, GoPro wasn't the best anymore. At least there were other contestants, and it wasn't like the big market leader. There's other brands that do good action cams, and then all of a sudden, we get a lot of emails like, "Hey, is this also going to be compatible with the Insta360, or is this also compatible with the blah blah blah?" And I mean, we were strategic, and certain cameras we did try to make compatible. But when we found, okay, this is really just a niche camera, not a lot of people have this, it's not worth for us making a new injection mold for this specific camera. We would have people in our community that were doing 3D design of the airhead compatible with a very specific camera, and then we would motivate them to do this. We're like, hey, why don't you, if you're a 3D artist, why don't you make it compatible? And then they would send us the 3D files, and we would then again give those back to the community and be like, hey, this guy made a 3D printable version that is compatible with the camera. If you have access to a 3D printer, you could just buy the wings from us and 3D print your own head, because it was like two wings and the head that holds the camera. So all of a sudden, the community was part of the product development in specific aspects, at least. So we really fostered this and wanted to have this effect. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like it was very intentional of you to do that. So it sounds like a very clever
Yes.
move.
Yes.
Build a loyal
was very
fan base.
intentional.
And but I also read it in one of your blog posts that when I think it was during the Kickstarter campaign, that you had like the wings sort of exploding on impact and things not really
Exactly.
working out. So like, how did you
Exactly.
handle that? Like knowing that you had 2,000 customers waiting in line for the product. Was it
Yeah, that
stressful
was
or
very stressful. Yep. Very
yeah,
stressful. And I think out of bare necessity, we did these proactive and transparent updates,
yeah,
because we're like, okay, if this product is, there's a risk of this being damaged, we better tell people now, because we can't pretend like it's perfect and then send it out to people. So I just felt necessary. I felt it was very necessary to be transparent about it. And then, yeah, I mean, we did find some solutions to make it better, but it was still not perfect. Um, and yeah, and that just meant more communicating, and we always called it expectation management. So we would, tell people, hey, you can safely do this, this, and that, and be careful, don't do this, because if so, then it might break. And then we were offering like replacement parts, obviously, right? And we're like giving them tips, because oftentimes what happens is when people have this product and they're on a shoot, um, and because the nature of throwing cameras is you're not gonna get it first time. Usually, you gotta do several tries until you have the perfect timing of your throw. That even like replacement parts, they're not helping you. You're on the shoot. There's a few athletes. There's a crew, whatever, and then it breaks on the first throw or second or whatever. You don't have time to wait for a replacement part. So we had like proactively like, hey, don't be afraid of duct tape. Just duct tape it back together. Everything for the shot. So we were like also taking our product and ourselves not too serious, and be like, hey, we know this is, if it's breaking, we recommend this type of glue, and basically duct tape is always worth it. So we would just kind of like be casual about it and not take ourselves too serious, and just be
nice.
open and transparent about what can go wrong. Because if as soon as you pretend like it's never going to go wrong, if it then goes wrong, people are pissed. But if you
Yeah,
tell them, hey, be careful, don't do this, it might go wrong, and then it does go wrong, they're like, oh well, I guess the guy told me, and they're not so, yeah, devastated about it.
yeah.
Yeah,
Communication is key, definitely. So that
absolutely.
was. It sounds like a problem solving under pressure, without a doubt. Cool.
Yes, exactly.
So after a few years of building Air Video, you made a tough call to shut it down eventually, right? So
Yep.
what kind of led to that decision, and how did you sort of process that as the founder of it?
I think now in hindsight, now I wasn't very clear on this, why being in that moment, but now like thinking back, I think it was a couple of reasons that came together. I think
Mm,
them by itself wouldn't be enough to stop, but there was basically three things that kind of like happened at the same time that brought me to that decision, which wasn't an easy one, as you said. It was a difficult call to actually
Mm.
shut it down. The first one was we we developed a new Air for smartphones. So our idea was, or this was back then, was like, okay, we're really limited in growth on scaling here because we basically can only sell this to people who have a GoPro. And at the same time, the my iPhone's camera got better and better, and at a certain point, the iPhone could do 120 frames per second, full
Yeah.
HD, and had like great stabilization. So we're like, why are we throwing GoPros if we have like at some point basically the iPhone became a better camera than a GoPro. So we're like,
Mm.
all right, this is the obvious solution is to throw our smartphones instead of throwing the GoPros. And the business aspect of this, what now we're going to mass market, right? Because everybody has a smartphone and it's not just the people with a specific type of GoPro. We could
Yeah.
theoretically sell to everyone. So this was the idea, and we developed the product. Put a lot of money into the development of that product. I also this was about the time I realized, okay, I've developed this first version, but I'm not a product designer. I'm not an industrial designer. I'm really coming to the limits of my skills and abilities here. So I hired a product or an industrial designer who had a big salary. I'm like, okay, but this is what we need to do to, enter this new phase of Air Video and actually throw a smartphone. So spend a lot of time on the development of this product. Again, try to involve the community, as I said, as well as part of the process. And then this launch of that smartphone product, we called it the Air Type, Air Throw Your Phone, so TYP. That was our like working title.
Mm.
The Air Type launch was very underwhelming. So in our minds back then, we're like, oh, this is mass market. If we get 2,000 backers for a GoPro thing without a community, at least we need 10,000 backers now, right? Because it's like the mass market, and
Yeah.
by now we have a certain like community and fan base and stuff. And then we were super underwhelmed by the success of this launch. We put a lot of effort into it. Um, Also kept delaying it because we felt like the product wasn't ready yet, and we didn't want to make the same mistakes, like promising something that wasn't finished. So we were really like, we need to finish this before we launch it. And as you might know as a business owner yourself, you make a certain plan and you like plan your budgets to release in summer. And then if you can't release in summer, all of a sudden you need another 6 months to cover the costs and then more. So we were
Mm.
like delaying the launch of this air type more and more. And then once we launched it, we didn't get the response we were hoping for. So that was the big one. We just kind of like failed with the second product generation. It wasn't really the second product. We had many versions of the Air, but this was the next big product. So
Yeah.
this was, I think, reason number one. And then the second reason was something very personal that just somebody in my family got really sick, and I felt like I just need to focus on like personal matters was happening around the same time. And you have to know, before that, I was spending basically every free minute on this business, right? I was
Yeah.
really like feeling it, and I love doing it. I don't want to sound like I'm complaining about this time. I was just happily involving all my time and energy into this business. Then we failed the product. Around the same time, somebody in my family became really sick. I was like, okay, I need to focus on this. And then the third smallest out of the three reason was that I've never really done anything else, right? I started this in the first year of university, and I really felt, I don't want to sound ungrateful, but I felt a little bit bored by it because I've just been kind of working on this business for 5 years at that point, and I was like, all right, I have so many more interests. I have so many more things that I could see myself doing. So that was like the third thing. And I think all these three reasons together then led me to the decision to eventually quit. Yeah.
Yeah.
But then once I've made the decision to quit until I've posted that blog post, the end of Air Video, there's like a year in between those two things. So
Yeah.
it took a
Okay.
whole year to actually wrap it up because I still had 1,000 of the GoPro units laying around. And I was like, okay, I can't just like shut this brand down. Otherwise I have all this stock left over. So I had to keep the brand alive, so to say,
Yeah.
to
To
sell
sell
out
the
the
stock,
last
right?
stock. And then I could put up my blog post and be like, okay, that's the end.
Yeah, that makes sense. So over the years, how many items did you sell? How many airs?
Around 12,000 airs,
Nice.
with additional like here replacement parts. So a lot of times somebody would buy an air, they would use it, be super happy, and at some point they would break one of the wings, and then they would order like a single wing extra, stuff like this. But I think yeah, around about 12,000 of like complete units. Yep.
And you had a few employees, right? Or at least one, at
Yes.
least the designer.
Yes. Yeah, there was. Originally, I started this in university with two friends, so it was three
Right.
of us. But they quickly dropped out. They dropped out basically before we shipped the first product. So
Okay.
this was the
How
initial
come?
hype. We were like, let's. They actually started another company, so they were
All right.
ambitious. I mean, by now they have like several companies. They're successful guys, and I'm still in touch with them. And even though it didn't end on good terms back then, by far by now we're friends again, and everything is well. But yeah, well, no, what happened was that all three of us were super naive and we're like, all right, let's make this Kickstarter campaign. As I said, went viral, became super successful. Then we realized, oh shit, this is a lot harder to produce than we initially thought. So this like excitement from the beginning was quickly gone. We're like just stressing about finishing production and delivering. And this was the moment we're like, okay, we have another idea. Let's actually start this business. And I was like, we kind of have a responsibility towards our 2,000 backers. So I kept it going by myself. Um, and then I did it just solo for a while, but then I actually moved back to Germany. So I went to study in the Netherlands. This is all happening in the Netherlands, and then I went back to Germany. And then here in Germany, I um, started a team again. And the first guy was Arne. He became my CFO. So he was my finance guy, doing all the numbers, financial stuff, business things. Then I mean, many people actually. The biggest the team ever was 6 people. Um, but in between, people came and left again. We had, for example, we had one guy who was in charge of like influencer marketing and was helping us with like social media. But then he dropped out again because he just wanted to do other things. Then we hired Sarah, who was then for the last 2 years, I think, doing like our social media stuff. So hired different people. Yeah, at most it was 6 people then.
But that's not a small team. That's pretty good. So, what's your experiences from hiring? Because I also read that you hire people based more on attitude and like cultural fit rather than maybe pure competence.
Yep.
Is that right? And
Yep.
was that successful for you? And like, do you think more startups should do the same thing, or any other
Mm.
lessons learned from there?
Yeah. Again, basically every time I had a position to fill, I just posted an Instagram story and hired people from our
Oh,
community. That's how it went down. I was just like, okay, we need somebody to do social media. Why don't I ask the people who follow us on social media? Because they know best what this channel is about, right? Um, and I was always a really big fan of really no hierarchies or very low hierarchies and everybody being just like on eye level with each other. And I think this requires you to hire based on culture and fit versus an experience. So even the product industrial designer that I hired, he was fresh out of university, um, around my age, and just friend of a friend, right? So just people I knew, and I know, okay, this guy knows my friend, and they went to uni together. Let's hire this guy. And I think this is something, I don't know, it depends on your leadership style, I think. I wouldn't just say this is the best way to go for all startups, but for my kind of leadership style, this was necessary because I didn't want to have hierarchies and I didn't want to have people that I'm like supervising and things like this. I just wanted to basically be around friends all the time and have
yeah,
them understand what we're about. So because especially for the industrial designer, this is like the last real person I hired. Especially in that case, we had like this job opening, and then we had like super experienced industrial designers apply. And I was like, I don't know, 28 at the time, and then there's like some 45-year-old guy who's like, oh, I've worked in this company and this, and I've designed this and that, and I'm like, okay, really impressive, but I don't think I can be your boss. Like this is doesn't feel right. I'd rather have a
yeah.
guy fresh out of uni who's like my age and kind of knows what this is about. So yeah, maybe the 45-year-old industrial designer would have designed a better product. I don't
Who
know,
knows?
but it would certainly wouldn't have been so much fun in the office with him like it was with my friend.
Yeah, no, I'm on the same page as you are. I think it's easier to send someone to learn a skill than to change personality. So if you can
Yep.
find the right fit, I think it's easier to train someone to learn the skill they
Yeah.
need in general. I mean, there's obviously going to be edge cases, but that's yeah, I'm definitely with you on that. So I mean, knowing what you know now, I mean, it's been a few, what, like 2 years maybe since you shut down AER. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah. Again, it's kind of like there's no clear point. Yeah,
Yeah,
between
true.
2 and 3 years, I would say, something like this. Yep.
So, I mean, now everything is easier in hindsight, right? So, knowing what you know now, would you have done anything differently with AER, like during these years?
Yeah. Sure. Let me think about that. I think one of the things, certainly, it was just a clear mistake to basically put everything on that smartphone product, right?
Mm.
We became so dependent on this product being successful that the moment it wasn't successful, everything fell together. So I wouldn't put that much risk onto one development, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
This is
yeah, absolutely.
certainly one thing. Another thing I would do differently is don't live above your standards, if that makes sense in English.
Yeah,
I'm not sure. What I mean by that is things were going really well, and we were like, okay, we need a super cool office space now, and it needs to be in the city center. Oh, I don't want to drive to work for half an hour. I need to walk there, and I happen to live in a big city where rental is super expensive, and all of a sudden I had to pay like crazy amounts of rent just because I was like, I just need a cool office, right? It's the least
of
we
course.
need to do things like this. And when all of a sudden then things became difficult and the smartphone product didn't work out, the owners of the office just wouldn't let us, because I was like, okay, we need to ditch the super big office. We need like something smaller. And they're like, oh, you signed for 5 years. There's no way you're getting out of the lease. And then this was in the middle of COVID too. And they were like, oh yeah, if you find the next renter, no problem, we'll let you out of the lease. But nobody wanted to rent a big ass office because it was the height of COVID. So we're like, okay, shit. So all of a sudden I had this like fixed costs of 2,000 euros just in rent. So things like this. I was definitely at certain moments living a little bit above what we actually, or I should have saved up more money and have a little bit more safety net instead of just spending everything on like office and stuff like this.
Yeah, I feel that's a very common mistake. You know, you spend it on a really fancy
Yeah,
office, or you have to have the newest of everything, whatever, and a big kickoff here, a
exactly.
conference there, and you
Yeah,
fly the team out for a conference in whatever country, and that costs money. So it's yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
don't live
exactly
above your
that.
means. It's a good takeaway.
Yes, above your means. That's the right phrasing. Yeah.
So if I'm not mistaken, I think you said that you still believe in like low tech tools for like creating cool shots and stuff. So if we have someone here listening or watching this and they want to sort of pick up where you left off, like what do you think? Is there some opportunities here that they should pick up on, do you think?
I think AI is changing a lot of this like creative sphere because
Yeah.
before we had all these AI tools, there was a necessity for becoming creative with the gear you're using and how you're using your gear, right? And now it's tempting to just basically like in the filmmakers where we say fix it in post, right? So we don't need practical effects. We don't need to actually throw our camera. We can just have like AI simulate that point of view.
A Sora
But I
prompt.
think exactly it's just a
Yeah.
Sora prompt at this point. Um, but I think if people are like me and you're not in it just for the end result. You actually love the process of filmmaking. You love tingling with cameras and you love finding creative solutions to a specific point of view, specific perspective, and you actually like the storytelling. I don't think this itch can be scratched by Sora, right?
Yeah.
If
Agreed.
people like me, we just love to be out there. We just love to actually tinker around and build stuff. And okay, can I attach my camera to this? Can I do that? How can I tell the story in a visually pleasing way? And I think maybe I'm a romantic, but like just typing a prompt in and getting the shot you want, it's not the same.
It's
So,
not the same. No.
yeah. And I think you could really learn a lot about, storytelling and filmmaking if you actually do it with a camera or with a smartphone for that matter, but actually getting out there and being creative. And I think just as the Alex
Hermose,
quoting
yeah,
earlier,
Alex Hermose.
Alex Amosi, being different is better than being better sometimes. And I
Yeah,
think this
definitely.
certainly applies in a world where we are just flooded with content left and right. Everything is full of content. So if you have an idea to do something different, um, I think that's worth going for and then trying that, because actually standing out is is becoming more and more difficult because there's so many creatives out there. There's so much content out there. If you have something that you haven't seen other people do before, then you should definitely do it, I would say. Oftentimes I see these, this is, I think, just the nature of like the algorithms in social media, where it's like somebody's doing something and that seems to be working really well, then everybody copies that thing. I find that a little bit boring, and I find it much more interesting to do. If you see everybody going one way, maybe the other way is also interesting. Maybe you do it differently.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's a very good advice. So I think that I would presume that a lot of creatives sees AI as more of a threat. Like, do you agree with that, or do you see it as an opportunity as well, or what's your view on
I
that?
see it much more as an opportunity than as a threat. I do have sympathy. I do have sympathy
Sympathy.
for people who feel threatened by it, and threatened in their livelihood, because all of a sudden they see that certain AI tools basically do what they've been doing and making money with. So I do have sympathy for those people. However, I strongly disagree. I think we creatives are the first ones that can actually reap the benefits of all these tools. Um, and I think one great example with that is something basic like, video editing, or photo editing for that matter. Um, it's not like people are not going to need photographers anymore. It's, in my opinion, the photographer can do more shoots and quicker editing than before. So the power isn't at the customer. The power is actually at the people providing the service, because they have access to all these tools and they are the first ones that are going to try it out. Um, the Let's stick with the example of a photographer. I think all of a sudden you see these like crazy image generating models that are basically doing photorealistic images and it looks fucking perfect. And I think maybe if you're a stock photo photographer, yes, that's scary because you're basically just doing stock photos. But if you're a wedding photographer or any other type of photographer, though, your customers aren't going to be like, oh, let me just generate my wedding photos. They're going to be like, oh, all right, let's look for a wedding photographer anyways. And then that wedding photographer maybe doesn't have to do, because specifically the example of a wedding photographer, you go to a wedding and you shoot for 8 hours, but then you have 4 days of post-processing where you're actually sorting the photos, editing the photos, delivering them to your clients. And those 4 days, with the help of good AI tools, can be compressed to one day. And your customer doesn't need to know that. You can still charge the same as you've always charged for a wedding, but all of a sudden you get to do 2 weddings a week or 3 weddings a week. So I think this like actually value creation that AI is helping you with is, us creators were the first ones that can take advantage of that. So I feel empowered by that, and would my advice to creatives would be, don't become defensive. Be like, I hate AI. It's gonna ruin my career. It's gonna be, no, embrace it. Look at it and actually go with the flow. I think, again, I'm a photographer, so I keep going back to that reference. But
Of course, yeah.
this is like 1999, and everybody's shooting on film, and digital cameras are invented. And then now, as a photographer, you could be like, all right, let me try to get a digital setup. Or you could be like, oh, I hate digital. It's going to ruin my career because I'm a film photographer. And I think those people who did that, they didn't make it. And those people who actually embraced the digital technology, they're going to keep going, and actually benefit from that because they can take much better and more efficiently take photos. Yeah. And I have
Yeah.
many more thoughts about the topic of AI and creatives. Yeah. But in general, I think it's a big opportunity for most creatives. There's really very specific niche services that are really gonna be, that I would be scared. Maybe if I'm a translator, maybe if I'm a stock photo photographer, that's scary then. But in general, no. I think we're the ones that can benefit from that.
Yeah, that's a good point. But like, can you actually, in your opinion, can you balance sort of using tech tools while without losing the like the heart of storytelling?
Yeah, I think so, because if we take it really far, AI is nothing but a tool um, to help you tell your story. But the initial story, the initial spark, the creative energy still has to come from a human, always. Because I think an artist can come up with an idea and use technology to bring that idea to life. If the idea comes from the AI in the first place, it's not interesting to us because we don't care about the story a robot has to tell us. We care about human stories. So the moment a human comes up with the story, I'm attached to it because I'm a human. I understand your story and your point of view, and I find it interesting, the story you're telling me. What tools you're using to tell me that story are secondary. The initial spark in the story comes from a fellow human, and that's why I find it interesting. And then if you use a film camera, a digital camera, or Sora, I don't care. You came up with the story, and I'm attached to that. And that's why I don't feel threatened by AI, because AI isn't gonna come up with a story. I mean, yeah, if you prompt it, but then again, who came up with the story? Probably the person who wrote the prompt, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then I can
totally.
connect to that person again. And I think if it's just, yeah, so I think we're connected to humans, and um, music is a good example in that context as well. I think if you have a love song that somebody wrote who's deeply in love and is using ChatGPT maybe to, or some kind of AI audio tool, I guess, to make the beat and to make the or maybe to even help write the lyrics, right? But then at the end, I know that this person was having these feelings and these emotions and put it into a creative work, and I'm happy to consume that. However, if now all of a sudden there's like a love song that's written by ChatGPT and the artist's name is ChatGPT, I just simply don't care because I know this is just a software. There's no real emotions there, and it can just pretend to feel emotions, but it's never going to be real emotions, so I'm not touched by it.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. Until AI develops enough so it actually has emotions, that's going to be a scary time.
Yes, exactly. But I think we're a few years away from that still.
I think we're safe.
Yeah.
That's a very good point. So I wanted to ask you about also because I know we're coming short on time a bit, but you worked in the US as well, right? So I know you worked in the Netherlands and in Germany, but also in the US, right?
Yeah, I didn't really work there. I was 16. I went I actually won a scholarship by the German government and the American Congress.
Oh, nice.
So this was a common thing. I think it still is common that people or like young teenagers, they do like an exchange for 1 year. They get to go to an American high school. In my case, my parents couldn't afford it, so this cost like 10,000 euros. At least that's, I think, roughly what it was back then. And my parents are like, yeah, I mean, it sounds cool, but we don't have we don't have the money to send you to the States. And then I ended up applying for a scholarship. And yeah, got accepted, got the scholarship. And then I actually spent, yeah, from like my 16th birthday to my 17th birthday, spent in a host family in Oregon, US, and I actually did the high school diploma there. Yep.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's my, that's going to be a good time when you're 16 to be over there. That's really cool.
Yes, absolutely. It was a really, really good time. Was also, I think, not because it's the US, but just in general, being away from your family with 16 taught me a lot, made me grow up, made me, take responsibility for my decisions, for my actions, which I think really helped me later on in life to have that experience early on. Yeah, it just opened up my mind towards the American culture, and I've kind of like stuck with that, and I've been listening
Mm.
to American TV show or watching American TV, listening to American music, just being in touch with America. And much later on in my life, just being able to actually consume American podcasts and have English as like a properly spoken and understood language, and just being also having a soft spot in my heart for American culture, I think really
Yeah.
helped me, especially in business, because yeah, there's just a lot of cultural differences between how Americans view business and how Europeans view business. And there's a lot of things we Europeans can definitely take from the Americans, even though I'm aware of a lot of things that go wrong in the US, absolutely, but especially in the startup and innovation business context, I think there's a lot to be learned from the US.
Yeah, I think nothing's perfect. So if you can just pick the best parts, that's gonna be a good solution. But
Yeah.
do you think there's a big difference in like European and American startup mindsets? And if so, like how does that differ? Do you think?
I think actually in startups, not so much. I think startups are pretty much universal. Doesn't really matter where they are. But I think in just generally businesses, like smaller businesses, there's a lot of differences. And also the way just society thinks about businessmen and thinks about capitalism as a whole is very different.
Yeah,
In Germany, at least, I don't know about Sweden, but in Germany, um, you easily and you and there's good reason to do so, but people are very skeptical of successful business people, right?
yeah,
So they're your fans and they support you as long as you're small enough. As soon as you come a little bit bigger, they're like, oh wait, no, 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 he's now the evil businessman. We don't actually like this at all, and you get to feel this
yeah.
everywhere, right? So when you go in Germany to someone, I'm just a creative with some ideas, they're like, oh, I'm all for it, go you. But as soon as you say, "Oh, I'm selling stuff online and I actually have a few employees," they're like, I don't know about that." So there's one
No,
big
I'll go to
cultural
Amazon or
difference.
Temu.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so that's one big difference. Then failing and failure is a big difference in how we as a society go towards people with failure. Because in the US, I feel like this story that, for example, I went through. Oh, I started a startup, and after 5 years, it didn't work out anymore. I quit. Everybody's gonna be like, "Oh, that's really cool. That's awesome." And if you tell that story in Germany, they'll be like, "Oh, so you're a loser. So you're totally this was all for nothing, right? So now what do? You got to find a 9 to 5, right? So you totally failed as a businessman." And yeah, this really sucks. And
Yeah, I feel
that's
it's
something
same thing
that's
here. Yeah,
yeah. Yeah,
I feel that
and I
as well.
think yeah, that's really something that we should take a look at the Americans and this mindset of actually failing is totally fine and it's a good thing and it's worth trying is something that is holding a lot of people back in Germany because it's not like that.
But it's a good topic to move into failing.
Hmm.
So I
Hmm.
mean, and this is I think is a good lesson for people. But how do you actually, like in your opinion, how do you know when to give up or when to just keep on grinding?
That's a really really good question,
Yeah,
and
because like
really
it's at
difficult for me
some
to
point in
answer.
startup you just have to grind because eventually
Absolutely,
if you grind enough, you know, success will come. But then at
yeah,
some point, if it doesn't come, you have to give up. So I don't have an answer for that. I feel it's very hard. So
yeah.
I'll put you on the spot here. I know, but it's a tricky question.
Yeah, yeah, it is very tricky, and I don't think I have an answer for it either. Maybe it's really something very unscientific, like a gut feeling, where you
Mm,
know, is this going to be worth it? Um, I think, while at one side it's certainly true that you have to kind of like be sometimes you have to be numb to criticism and just be like, okay, just because this guy doesn't believe in my idea doesn't mean anything. That's healthy as a founder because you just need that resilience if people are like trying to,
yeah,
talk you down and talk you out of it. But if it just keeps happening, um, I think you just have to, at least be open to the possibility. And even like I think it can be true that you, on one hand, don't take things personal, but still listen because most of the time people there's some kind of truth to it if they're
yeah,
telling you, hey, this I don't think this is gonna work anymore. So that's one side. If you're like talking to like outside people, kind of keeping that balance where it's like, okay, I'm not gonna get demotivated by people because this in my context happened all the time. People are like throwing cameras. That's dumb. I can just buy a drone,
yeah,
right? So this happened all the time daily. And I needed that kind of like thick skin to just be like, all right, then it's not for you. There's enough people who want to throw cameras. Just leave me alone. Um, but then 2 years later, when people are like, I'm never gonna throw my smartphone. I'm never gonna throw my smartphone. then I should have listened. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so there's a fine line between like, all right, being like confident in your ideas and your stuff, and then also listening to people who maybe don't like it. That's one thing. And then I think another thing is what really helps in situations like this is having like an open and transparent and authentic relationship to your team. Because they oftentimes, if you're the founder, you're like the visionary, it always keeps grinding. If you have a good relationship to your team, then if they know they have the freedom to actually be like, hey, listen, I don't believe in this anymore, or we
Mm.
didn't think about this or that. And I think it's important, and this is your job as the leader to actually have a relationship like that and make sure your employees um, have the balls to say critical things to you. I think oftentimes it happens that you're so, as an employee, you're so like, you know, you look up to your founder and you're like, okay, this guy really knows what he's doing. But deep inside of you, you're like, I don't know if this is really going to work out. And then I think it really comes to that like relationship the founder has to his or her team, whether or not they have the guts to actually raise these topics. And I
Yeah.
think if it comes from within your team, you should definitely take it serious because they know best. Um, Next to you, those are the people who understand your business most. And if there's skepticism coming from within your team, maybe it is time to, either let it go, stop grinding, or do a pivot or go in a different direction, but reevaluate your decisions and your strategy for sure. So those would be the things that come to mind, but it is super difficult. And in my specific case, I knew that it's time to stop grinding just because I didn't have the energy to keep grinding. So for me,
Yeah.
it was really at some point, but hopefully people don't hit that point. At some point, it becomes very, very clear. As soon as your body and your mental health, there are signs in that regard, then it's obvious, but that's too late usually. So
Yeah. I
it'd
mean,
be ideal if you catch it before that. Yeah.
yeah, that's the final signal. If you just don't, you're just fed up with it, then it's probably time. But
Exactly.
it feels
Exactly.
like we're
Yeah.
sort of coming back to the same things over and over again. The communication is key, like whether it's with
Hmm.
your fan base, your customers, your waiting list, or with your employees, right? Like I think if you
Yeah.
just can communicate clearly, it solves a lot of problems.
Yes.
And not afraid of
Exactly.
critiques and like being honest. Yeah,
Yeah. And the flip side of that is communication takes time and it sometimes
yeah,
can feel very inefficient. And I think this is the risk that you're like, okay, this is totally inefficient. Why are we having all these meetings? Why are we talking a lot? Because it is inefficient. But I think it is very important and it's crucial, especially in like tough times. It's super important. And in those times, it's even more difficult to take the time to communicate, right? So, for
yeah,
example, one thing I did with my team is we had quarterly reviews. So it was a one-on-one that I did with every employee every 3 months. And we would really block our calendars for it. And sometimes this is difficult because you're like in the middle of like a product launch or whatever. And then
yeah,
all of a sudden doing like a feedback thing for 2 hours just feels like wasted time. But I always made it a case to be like, no, this is important. This is super, super important. Let's block the time and actually talk about this. And then it's not like, how was your day, blah, 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 but actually go deep and actually ask those questions and things like, what can I do better as your leader? What are things that are holding you back from becoming a better? Or what are things that I did wrong? And the other way around, I will always aim to be completely honest about this. And it was important to me to have like a base of like a trusted relationship where everybody's welcome to raise concerns.
yeah. I think that's
Yep.
a healthy place to be in, a healthy company to be in as well.
Yep.
Yeah, makes sense. Right, good stuff. So, in order to sort of try to wrap it up a bit, I have a few quick fire rounds for you. So, if you're ready to go, just a quick answer. You don't have to expand on things. If you want to, please do. But
All right.
right, we're good to go. So, I got 5 questions for you. Number one, what's your favorite AI tool right now?
Still is ChatGPT. That's one of them. We didn't talk about this now, and I will try to keep this short. but since not working on Air Video anymore, I'm a freelance web designer and web developer. But I come from the low code and no code world where I didn't really learn programming really, and I just worked with these low code and no code tools. And because of ChatGPT and Copilot and things like that, I'm all of a sudden basically a real developer, or at least I can pretend to be one. So certain jobs or clients I would have declined 2 years ago, I'm now just accepting because I know, even though I don't know exactly how to do it, I'm sure with ChatGPT I can figure it out. So ChatGPT, and the second one is all the AI features inside the Creative Cloud app. So I'm a Adobe customer and I have the Creative Cloud, and that's where I do my video and photo editing, and they're like slowly releasing more and more features within that software. So I much rather edit my photo with AI features inside of Photoshop versus using DALL-E to make the photo in the first place.
Yeah, good. That's good stuff. So what kind of no-code tool or low-code are you using? Is it Bubble or something else?
Webflow for
Yeah.
developing
Nice.
websites. Yeah, mostly Webflow. Yeah, and then
Cool.
Zapier and things like this to connect apps. And, yeah.
Yeah. Do you have an opinion on like Zapier or Make? Which one is?
Uh,
No.
I'm just a long time user of Zapier and I'm happy with it.
Same here.
So I
Yeah.
never really had the urge to try a different one. But yeah, Zapier is good enough for me. Works every time I need it. Yeah,
If it works, why move, right?
exactly. Yeah.
Right. What's the most unexpected thing that you learned from your customers?
Again, talking about my career now and my customers now as a freelance designer and developer, um, customers oftentimes don't know what they want.
Yeah.
They think they know, but they don't. And they come to me because they think they want a new website. Turns out they actually want new photos. They want new copy. They're unhappy with their website and they think it's the website, but it's actually the content on the website. That's what's bothering them. So that's one thing. And the other thing is, and again, I feel like communication is a reoccurring theme here, but
Yeah.
knowing what you do does not equal knowing how to communicate what you do. So I often make websites, design and develop websites for startups. And they know exactly what they're doing. They know exactly what their offer is and what their service is. But when it comes to writing the headline for the website or a little introduction on what their service is, they struggle. They really
Yeah.
struggle. And so knowing what you do is not knowing how to communicate that. And then this is, I think, where I can provide value and actually benefit and actually, help people bring all their pitch into a little concise headline and actually put that on the website.
Yeah. Copywriting is an essential skill, but it's hard.
Absolutely. It's hard. And again, to bring it back to AI real quick, it's tempting to have AI write your copy, and it certainly helps, but it's usually not that good. It's a first
Mm.
draft, and you should be treated as that. Um, and one thing in my everyday life as a freelance web designer is that I pitch it right in the beginning. I'm like, okay, do you just want design or do you need me to actually do copy as well and actually write the
Yeah.
text? And you're like, no, 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 no. We got this. We got this. Um, and then they don't have it, and
Yeah.
it's pretty shit. And or sometimes they deliver it super late, but I want to get started with the design work. So what I did back then was just put like placeholder text in there, right? And
Yeah.
nowadays, I don't need placeholder text at all because I just basically put in their old website and be like, on ChatGPT, put the old website in there and be like, hey, summarize the services of that company. And then I have my placeholder text. And then I put that to just pitch the designs in my like mock-up. And oftentimes the clients are they're like, oh, this is really good copy. We should just use it. I'm like, no, it's not. It's really shit copy from ChatGPT. You guys
Yeah.
should totally go over this and fix it. But yeah, communicating what you do is actually difficult. And I feel like maybe because of my past with Air Video, I've become pretty good at it.
Yeah. Sounds like it. Yeah, I absolutely agree. I don't think ChatGPT is like great for just generating every single copy, but I find it like I'm a bad copywriter, but I use it extensively when it comes to sort of unblocking my writer's block. Just come up with something, some idea to start with, and then I can sort of
Yep.
iterate from it. Like that's what I find it really useful.
Yeah, yeah,
The
absolutely.
first
And
few words.
summarizing
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
Summarizing stuff. It's huge on that. And this is what often happens in my context as well. I finally get the text from the client and they're trying to explain their features or product or whatever it is, and it's super long. And I tell them
Yeah.
like I need this to be like a small paragraph, and then they send
Yeah.
me back half a page, and I'm like, but then I just put that half a page in ChatGPT and be like, make this half as long without
Yeah.
losing the essence of it. And ChatGPT
Write
is
a
really good at
write a
that.
one-liner based on this. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. This kind of stuff, and then that's really
That's
good.
good.
Yeah.
Right. Sort of touching on the air-ish topic here. If you could throw anything, not cameras or phones, what would you throw?
What would I throw myself? Maybe.
Yeah. I was gonna say family members are not allowed, but you sort of you were too
Yeah,
fast.
yeah, myself. I think I would throw myself.
That would cool.
No,
Yeah.
I mean, just as a little side note, um, I've read a book years ago about lucid dreaming. I don't know if you're familiar with
Mm,
that,
little bit,
right?
not much, but yeah.
The, yeah, basically the art of controlling your dreams,
Yeah.
becoming aware that you're dreaming in the first place and then actually controlling your dreams. And I've successfully done that a few times. And the
Nice.
first thing I do when I realize I'm in a dream, I start flying. Because in the dream world, you can do whatever you
Yeah.
want, and it's actually fascinating. So if people want to look into that, there's a few good books about lucid dreaming and techniques on how to actually get there. Um, yeah, so I've ever since a
Throw
child,
myself. Good answer.
I would throw myself, yep, and just
Yeah,
fly.
perfect. Maybe this will be a book recommendation, but yeah. So if you had to recommend something to scrappy founders or other entrepreneurs, what's a book, a podcast, or a resource that you would like to share with them that they should know about?
Yes, I've prepared, or I brought two books. The first one is this one, Mark Manson's The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Yeah, that's a
It's
good
awesome.
book. Yeah,
Yeah, it really changed my life. Not just the business aspects of it, they're certainly in there, but the general, like, it's almost philosophical, I would say, this book. So this is a big recommendation. I've actually read it in English, and then I bought it in German and read it again in German because I'm a big fan.
nice.
This one, and this guy Mark Manson, he's released other books since then and has podcasts, is online as a content creator.
Yeah,
But out of all his stuff, this book, that's I think his best work. So that, and the other one is The Tiny MBA by Alex Hillman. Exactly, Tiny MBA. Super nice, concise little lessons. Very quotable, very good, and a lot of like truths in there. Yeah, this is a really good one, especially or specifically for like founders or yeah, startups, creatives. Those two.
perfect.
And I have one podcast as well. Um, it's called Acquisitions Anonymous, by several people. One guy is Michael Girdley. Um, Really cool podcast. They basically talk about, yeah, acquiring businesses. It's not like I'm doing that many times, but I find it super interesting because um, they talk about how successful businesses run basically and what it takes
Nice.
to acquire a business and then keep it running. And then what I found interesting specifically about this, there's many resources about startups and innovation, but they often talk about like seemingly boring businesses like, oh, there is a car wash for sale in some state in the US and it's 4 million, but it makes 2 million annual revenue. And you just have to do this step and this step and that. And all of a sudden, after 3 years, you got the price again and you're making profits. So this podcast really helped me understand the basics of business, basically. Acquisitions Anonymous. That's what it's called.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot of the boring business sort of genre lately, mostly by like Cody Sanchez, and she's into like vending machines and car washing and maybe
Yeah.
RV parks and stuff like that. So that's really cool.
Yeah.
It's far from what I'm doing, but it's really cool.
It's interesting because in the end, every business is kind of run the same way, right? You always have
Yeah,
your cost of goods sold, you have your fixed costs, you have your margins, and then you have profit. And this is universal for every business. And sometimes it's easier to understand simple, basic business models, to learn these things than to talk about Google as a business.
yeah,
This is insane. It's so complicated. There's so many revenue streams and things they're doing. But if you're just talking about a vending machine, it's simple. You pay
Yeah.
rent, you have your products, there's a margin on it, and that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. Super simple.
And after being in the startup sphere for a while, I also see value in those types of businesses, right? You don't have to reinvent the wheel all of a sudden. If you're super happy running a few vending machines or a hairdresser saloon or whatever it is, and you can sustain your own life and maybe have a handful of employees, maybe that's what makes you happy, right? So I think there's a lot of value in those like seemingly boring businesses, and
Yeah,
there
definitely.
should be um, we should also respect those business people, right? It's not just the startup founders that are doing all the new tech stuff. It's the guy next door who's having a local fruit shop. That's
Yeah,
also
absolutely.
have yeah worth something and important for us for sure.
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely agree. So, last question, which is again touching on startups here. So I'm putting you on the spot here as well. So what's a startup idea sitting on your list that someone else should steal from you?
I got a good one here.
Oh,
I
great.
haven't pitched this many times, so this pitch might be a little bit, rusty, but basically, community-based sports broadcasting and commenting. I want to pitch it this way. I don't know. Are you? I've seen you on your Instagram. You're a runner and like a endurance athlete. Are you
Yeah.
also a fan of a team sport or like a spectator sport of some sort?
Yeah, I actually used to play handball. Now that's not big in the US, but it's sort of big in Europe at least. So I played handball for like
Yeah,
25 years. So yeah, absolutely.
absolutely. Handball. Let's use handball as an example. So I'm sure there's like a Swedish league of like the
Yeah.
best teams, right? And then there's some kind of broadcasting channel where you can watch those games. Um, and I'm suspecting you're probably, as a fan, you're probably a fan of like the team of Stockholm, I
Yeah.
assume. I don't know. A lot of
Yeah.
people are fans of
Correct.
their like local city, right? So instead of watching on TV, the game of Stockholm versus some other handball club, and there's like an objective broadcaster who's just commenting on both sides. How fun would it be if you could watch that game, but have the commentator be also a Stockholm fan and on purpose don't be objective, but actually talk about your team much more than the opposing team and have like inside jokes and have all that. So my startup idea would be it's a really big one that I'm never gonna work on. That's why I'm also happy to
Yeah.
pitch it here. Um, would be to have kind of like a platform similar to Twitch that handles the broadcasting of the image, but then is a platform for content creators to do their own commenting and do that for their specific audience. So, for example, if you have then, I don't know, what's another handball team that Stockholm might be playing against?
So let's go with Djurgården is my team.
All
It's
right.
a Swedish
So
team. That team.
exactly, and you could that team, and you could have you could turn on, go on my website, watch that game, and then you could decide what commentator you want. You want the of that team or of that team, and then they would be kind of like hosting their own watch party and talk about their side of things. And one thing that this was inspired from was Joe Rogan's Fight Companion. I don't know if you
Yeah.
know those
Yeah.
episodes where he's just kind of like doing a podcast next to the show. This was the initial spark, but then it came back to me, this idea, during the Olympics this summer or this past summer, because that's when this is basically happening. If you watch the Olympics in German television, the commentator is a German guy who's rooting for the Germans. And it's
Yeah.
much more fun than some objective commentator who's like fair to everyone. It's much more fun as a German to have a guy rooting for the Germans and actually talking about the German athletes versus everyone else, because that's what I'm most invested in. So yeah, my idea would be a platform for content creators to do live commenting of sports. And this would then, of course, require you to have deals with the leagues. And, if you put this to football, you'd need the rights to actually show the images. And this is like a really complicated business model where you'd have to involve the Bundesliga and the FIFA and the Handball Association and the NBA and whatever. But I think it would make it much more entertaining for people to watch, because you kind of like almost like you're watching it with a bunch of friends and everybody's rooting for the same team. Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
And then doing like a business model like Twitch and social media itself, where the content creators obviously get paid per stream, and then the revenue model would be ads, which then again can be targeted because people watching this channel are people from Stockholm. So maybe you could have the local Stockholm bakery have an ad in there because they know 90% of the people are going to be living in Stockholm. So ad revenue model platform for creatives or content creators to do commenting on sports.
That's a really good idea. Yeah, I immediately also thought of Joe Rogan's Fight Companion. I was like, yeah, that's really cool.
Yep.
And I've also
Yep.
seen on Twitch you have these sort of it's basically like game companions. So basically they stream themselves and then you just talk about the game that's going on, but you don't see the game, of course. So I immediately thought of that, like if because the ones on Twitch that I watched, if I also had a stream on there and this guy commentating, that would be amazing. So yeah. That's a really, really good idea. And the fact that it is complicated is a good moat. So it's pretty good.
Yeah, true. Once you have those contracts, and I don't know how it is with handball in Sweden, but I'm a football fan, soccer, football, European football. And that world is changing rapidly in the last years. It's crazy. Like the TV channels, they're all paid, obviously. Like there's no free Bundesliga games. You can't just watch them in free TV. But the contracts are changing every season. There's a new company, a new streaming thing. So now some games are on Amazon Prime, some are on this, some are on this. And if you actually want to watch every Bundesliga game, you have to have like 4 different subscriptions because all the Friday games are on a different subscription than the Saturday and Sunday. So you're literally paying like 200 euros a month if you want to watch every game. It's crazy. So this world is certainly changing, and they're like renegotiating these contracts on a yearly basis. So I think there is opportunity, but yeah, it's not something I'm actively pursuing or anything. But it's a fun idea, and maybe on that. No, go ahead. Yeah, please.
Yeah, I mean, just the fact that they are sort of like renegotiating deals every year means that this is the time to do something like this. Because in the past, they've signed like one specific channel for like 4 years or something, and they've been the exclusive partner for that. Now, as you say, you have multiple partners streaming various games. So maybe now is the right time to do this. You seem
and then I think,
to it.
the way to go would be to focus on one market, on one sport. Be like, all right, let's start with handball, or let's start with basketball or football, and try to get the foot in that door. And I think there is a way to prototype this. Because this is basically what Joe Rogan is doing, right? He just says, "Oh, and we're starting the second round now." And this just enables viewers to, have the thing side to side and have it at the same time. And you could prototype it like this. Basically, a prototype is a Twitch channel and somebody just doing it and seeing if they can find an audience. And you just have to have the subscription to watch the game, put it on mute, and put the Twitch channel on. And then them doing their little like, okay, we're starting minute 30 now. And then you can just get it synced all the time. So, yeah, a low prototype would be... Yeah, go ahead.
I guarantee that if someone makes a working prototype of this, you have a high likelihood of getting acquired by Amazon, because Amazon is Prime and Amazon owns Twitch, so you're like and they stream games, so they have all the things they need already. So if someone comes up with this and then sells it to Twitch or to Amazon, that's a gold mine.
Yeah,
that
sure.
could work. That's a really good idea.
So Thank you.
Someone should steal this. It's
yeah, definitely. Someone should steal this. And I'm the first one who's gonna watch the commentator of the Stuttgart games, the city I'm living in, from the Stuttgart perspective, and giving me all the info about the latest Stuttgart things, and I don't care too much about the other team.
Yeah. Imagine the fan club passionate leader is like commentating the game, going just crazy. That would be something.
Exactly.
That would be really cool.
That would be super fun. Yeah.
Right, that's actually all the quick fire. That wasn't very quick, but still, well, let's call it quick fire rounds that we had.
Fair enough. Yeah.
So nowadays you do web development. Where can people find you online?
levinpablo.com, just like my name right here, .com. They can find all the info, and on Instagram, levinpablo.jpg, JPG. Yeah.
Perfect. And it's all going to be in the show notes also, so I'll link to that in the show notes. And thank you so much. It was a really good talk.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, good talk. Good luck with your web career. It's awesome.
All right. Thank you very
Right.
much. And good luck to you with the new podcast.
Thank you. Yeah, this is the first podcast, so it's a start. It's really good. Very, very good start. Right.